Well, good morning, good evening, whenever you're watching this video. I wanted to put together a quick video to talk about some of the key commands you'll need for this course on the command line, and put together a couple things. One, there's this PDF that is on Canvas, and I put this together for another course, but it's applicable here. On the left, these are some of the common functions that we'll do from the command line. And then there's a column here for how to do them on Windows, on a Mac, and on Linux. Just note that in this course, we'll be working on Vulcan. Vulcan is running Linux, so we're just going to do the commands that are here in the far right corner. In this PDF, there's a couple of pages of commands. There's a little bit about how to use the nano editor. Maybe we'll do a separate video on that. There's one slide about how to access Vulcan outside of VS Code. We've taken a look at how to access Vulcan from VS Code, and I'll show you how to access it outside VS Code. And then there's one about how to do a secure copy to move files on and off Vulcan. And again, we've already talked about how we can create files on Vulcan using VS Code and how to download them from Vulcan using VS Code, but this will be how to do it from the command line outside of Visual Studio Code. If you're in Visual Studio Code and you are connected to Vulcan, then all the commands that we're going to talk about will work down here in the terminal. But for this demonstration, I'm actually going to do all of these commands outside in just a shell. If you are on a Mac, you can open your terminal. To get to your terminal, you can open your Spotlight and just search for terminal, or if you open Finder in the applications folder and the utilities subfolder, the terminal application is in there. If you're on Windows, it's a little more complicated. You can't use the command prompt, but you can get a PowerShell or Windows Terminal or Windows Subsystem for Linux. Those will probably require you to download either the PowerShell or the terminal, or to enable Windows Subsystem for Linux. Most Win 10 installations, I don't think, come with those out of the box, but it's really simple. You can go to the store and get any of those. I'm going to use this Windows PowerShell here. And the first thing that I will do is I will just connect to Vulcan. I'm already, again, if you are on UAB Secure, you don't need to use the VPN. In my case, I'm not on UAB Secure, but I've got my VPN up already. Just to save us a little time. So to secure shell into Vulcan is actually the same way that we did it in VS Code. We're just going to type it in though, SSH for secure shell, and then our Blazor ID at moat.sys.uab.edu. And then it should ask us for our password, our Blazor ID password. And if it works correctly, we should see the Vulcan splash screen, but of course it did not work correctly. So we'll try this again. Okay, and now we got the splash screen. If you might see this in VS Code as well, probably some of you haven't seen this, but if you see something that looks like this, that tells you that you're on Vulcan. In this case, I'm on Vulcan number 19. I think we've mentioned there's a bunch of Vulcan servers that are load balanced together, and I'm on number 19. It really doesn't matter. And then there's some information about the processor and that kind of thing. And then I will see my prompt down here. I'll make this just a little smaller so that way we can see this here. Okay, and so your command prompt might look a little different, but probably will look something like this. It'll have your Blazor ID and it'll tell you that you're on Vulcan 19. One of the first commands, I think we talked about this in lab, is pwd. That's for print working directory, and that will tell us where we're at. In this case, it tells me that I'm in my home folder, home UAB, and then my Blazor ID. You can, at any point, if you get lost, you can always use pwd to print your working directory. I'm actually going to use a command clear. That will clear my screen and just bring me up to the top, just so we're not looking down here at the bottom all the time. That way we can just focus on the top of the screen. The next command that we'll talk about is list, ls. This will list all of our files or folders. And this is very helpful, so that way we can see, what's in our current folder here. There are lots of options that we can add to it. We can say ls-a, dash is just the minus sign and then the lower case letter A, and that will list all the files in the folder, including our hidden files. Typically, hidden files start with a period or a dot. And you can see that we can see these files here that we couldn't see before, ls-a. The other one that we'll probably use will be ls-l for long listing, and that gives us additional information about our files. The very useful thing I look at all the time is the permissions for the file. The first letter here is a D for directory, meaning that this CS330 is a directory, as opposed to this make file here, which is not a directory. And then there are read, write, execute permissions listed for each file. They are in order: the read, write, execute permissions for the owner of the file, read, write, execute permissions for anybody in the group that this user's in, and read, write, execution permissions for all others. And we'll talk about how to change that and how to set that. You can also combine those together. So we could say ls-l-a, and now we're getting all the files and we're getting the long listing. And just to make it even more short, we can combine those together, ls-al. And the order doesn't really matter. And a lot of times for these flag options, the order doesn't matter. You might wonder what other flag options are available to you. If you say ls-help, then you will get a listing of a bunch of different options and information about this function. But you can also use this command man, which stands for manual, and then whatever command you're interested in this case, ls, and that will give us the manual pages, or the man pages for short, for this particular function. You can see it describes what it does. It lists the different options that we've got there, and we can hit the space bar to go to the next page, or you can scroll up and down. And when you're done looking at it, you can hit Q. The other thing that you can do is you can go to Google or your, whatever your search engine is of choice, and you can also type in man and then the command that you're interested in. And typically it'll be the first link that comes up. And you can also get the same manual page information just on the web, and maybe format it a little more nicely. And again, this will show you kind of more details about what this means to run this function and all the different options you can use and what those mean. And so that you can see there's a lot of capability here. We won't have the chance to go through all of this capability, but I just wanted to point out a few key commands in this video. So again, if you need help, you can do the command, and typically you can do .help. That'll give you some information. You can do man and then the command, and that'll give you information, or you can Google it as well. And those are the three ways that you can typically get help. Okay, I'm going to clear again. I'm just going to list all of the folders here. Now, if I want to make a new folder, I can say make directory, mkdir, and then the folder name. So I'll call mine test. And I'm actually going to make I'll make a test one as well. Then I can list, and you can see now I've got a test and a test one folder. And then to navigate into that folder, I will say cd or change directory into test. And now if I print my working directory, you can see that I am in the test folder. And then I can list, and I shouldn't see anything because I haven't put any files in there yet. And of course it's empty. So to navigate into a folder, you can do cd. To go up one level, you can do cd ... and that will take me back up to my home folder. And you can keep doing that. You can also do absolute paths. So in Linux, we'll be using forward slashes. I know on Windows, you typically use backslashes, but in Linux, we'll be using forward slashes. And so, we could say home UAB. Let's see, I had a folder called old, I think. And so you can do it that way. And now well, I guess I don't have a folder. Oh, I know. I have a folder called bjd hold. And now I'm in that folder, so you can use absolute paths. One thing to save time, you can do the up arrow to repeat commands that you've previously entered. Most shells keep a little history of it, and so you can use the up arrow to go backwards in time and do commands that you've run before, or the down arrow goes forward in time until you get to the last command. So that kind of can save you a lot of keystrokes. You don't have to keep entering the same things over and over again. The other thing that you can do, let's just get back to my home folder. You can type in partial letters and then hit the tab key, and it will try to auto-complete it for you if it can. If it can't, then if you have multiple items with the same letters, it won't complete. But in this case, it was able to figure out which one I want. So if you type in a letter or two and hit the tab key, it'll try to autocomplete for you, and that might also save you some keystrokes. So arrows and tab keys are your friends. Okay, so that's how to navigate into the folder. Now, if I want to create a file, typically I'll open an editor to create a file. I can also use a command called touch. And I'll just call this test file 1. And if you say touch, if the file is already there, it'll update the last saved date. But if it's not there, then it will create the file for you. You can also use a text editor, a lightweight text editor that's installed in pretty much all Linux distributions is Nano. Maybe we'll talk about that in another video, but if you type nano and then the file that you want to edit, it will open it up. If the file doesn't exist, then it will create the file, and then you can exit out by doing Control Exit out of nano. So I've created well, I didn't save it, so it didn't create my test file 2 when I left Nano, but I've got a file here called test file. So that's how to create files. If I want to copy that file, I can say CP, and then the syntax is from and to. And so I'll put the path and the file name that I want to copy from, and then the path and the file name that I want to copy to. So let's say I want to copy test file 1, and I want to copy it into my test1 folder. Now, test1 was up 1 level. So in my home folder, so that's the 2 dots, it means go up 1 level, and then put it in the test1 folder, and then the / just means put it there. I could rename it to something else if I wanted, new name, but I'm just going to keep it the same name, and I will copy that. So now if I go look in my test1 folder, I should see test file 1. Okay, to move the file, it's the same thing, but you just use MV instead. Again, from and to. So wherever the file is, then wherever you want to move the file to. This is also a good way to rename a file. So if I say move test file 1 to test file 2, it's going to take my test file 1 file, and it's going to rename it as test file 2 and move it into the same folder because I didn't tell it to put it into a different folder. So that's a good way to rename files. So now this is called test file 2. Okay, and the last major thing we need to talk about with respect to copying files and moving files and that kind of thing is delete. And we talked in lab that there's very few things you can do that can actually break your computer, but this is the one thing that can break your computer. There's no undo with this, so be very, very careful with it. But the command is rm, and then you give it the name of the file that you want to delete. So if I say rm test file 1 or test file 2, it will delete that file, and you can see it's no longer there. Again, there's no undo, there's no going back, so be very careful with that. You can also remove directories. Let me go up 1 level, and let me remove the test1 folder. If you say rmdir, remove directory, and then the name of the folder that you want to remove, that will remove it. Again, there's no undo, so just be very careful with it. And so you can see now my test1 folder is gone. There's also an ability to do recursive deletion. So basically it'll delete the folder and all the files in it and all the subfolders and files in it and that kind of thing with, I think it's the -r flag. Again, be very, very careful with that. There's also, let me make a new directory here to demonstrate this. I'll make a test2 folder and I'll make a test3 folder. Okay, so now I got a test1, test2. You can also use the star or the asterisk command, and that is the wildcard. And what this will do is this will remove anything that starts with the letters TEST, and then if there's anything after that or not. So if you hit this, oh, I'm sorry, I need to remove directory, test asterisk. Works with files or directories. In this case, I didn't remove my test folder because there's something in it. I would have had to use the -r option flag to recursively delete that. And then one other thing that I should point out is if you use the -i flag, that'll prompt you before you delete. So I would highly recommend, if you want to use remove, that you start by using the -i flag, that you do not use the asterisks, and that you do not use the -r, but that you name each file or folder that you want to delete specifically, and just do one at a time if you're just starting off until you get more comfortable. Because if you say, remove asterisk -r, you can wipe pretty much your hard drive. And I think there are some safeguards on Vulcan, but would not recommend testing those. So just be very careful with the delete command. That's the one thing that, again, can get you in trouble. Okay, so that is the basics. Print working directory to list where we're at, ls to list all the files in the directory, cd to move into a directory, or again, .. to move up one directory. We talked about copy with cp and move, and how we identify the file we want from and then to, and that's kind of the general approach with those. And then we talked about deleting. One thing that I should say before we, maybe two more things I should say before we leave Vulcan. There's a command called cat, and then it takes a file name, and that just means show me this file. So if I say cat makefile, it'll show me the contents of my makefile. I can't remember what cat stands for anymore, but I'm sure you can look that up. And so you can see that this is the contents here of that makefile, and that works with most all files. And then the last thing is we talked about how you can list things in the long view, and that will tell you the permissions of your files and folders. If you want to change those permissions, you can use a command called chmod, and that is change mode, short for change mode. And then you give it the new permissions, and then the file name that you want to change, and that will change the permissions. So if I, let's do this to copy.txt, you can see right now that I've got read, write, and execute permissions, but folks in the group do not have write permissions, and everybody outside the group also does not have write permissions. So there's a couple different ways you can change those permissions. Typically, you'll see that given as 3 numbers in a row, and then the file name to copy.txt. So that's one way you can do it, and I'll show you that changed now. I might not have permissions to change the others, but the other way you can do it, so in Vulcan is kind of locked down. You might not have all the permissions that you need. You can ask the root user to do something by using the command sudo before your command. So in this case, I'm going to ask the root user to change the permissions on this file for me. I don't know if this will work because we are pretty locked down. but I'll give it a go just to see. You might have some success, you might not. Yeah, and in this case, it will not do it for me. But on Linux systems, if you use the command sudo, then that's asking the root user. That way you don't have to log off and log back in as the root user. In the case of Vulcan, none of us have root user access anyway. So if you wanted to do something as root, you'd have to put sudo in front of whatever your command is. We probably won't be using that in this class though, but if you want to just change the permissions on a file, you can use the chmod command and then the new permissions and then the file name. There is a little decoder ring that I provided in the reference guide for what those permissions are. And I'll pull that up here so we can take a look at that. You can do it one of two ways. Typically, people will put a number in front of it. You can also put the, read, write, execute letters in there and just put a dash anywhere you don't want permission to be used. But if you want to use the numbers, this is the little decoder over here. You can think of read, write, and execute each as a bit. And so there were 3 bits, and in binary, it would be 2 to the 0 power, 2 to the first power, 2 to the second power. And in decimal or octal, that would be a 1, a 2, and a 4. And then you would just set your bits and add up the number to get the number here. So if I want myself to have read, write, and execute, I would set 1 bit for each of those. So that would be a 4 plus 2 plus 1 equals 7. So then I would put a 7 in as the first number. And then the permissions I want for the group, I would set next. In this case, maybe I want them to have read and execute permissions. Execute for a folder means that you can navigate into the folder. Execute for a file means that you can run that file. So maybe I want others in the group to be able to have read and execute. So that would be a 1 for read, or a 4. And a 1 for execute, or a 1. So 4 plus 1 equals 5. And so that's where I got the 5 there. And maybe for all others, maybe I want the same thing. I want everyone else to be able to read and execute it, but I don't want them to write. So that would be a 5 as well. If I don't want any permissions, then obviously that's a 0, 0, 0, which is a total of 0. So I think from that, you can kind of decode what the numbers mean and how to set permissions. I think for the most part, you probably won't have to set any permissions in the course, but just in case you need to. Want to provide that information. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is how to copy to and from Vulcan outside of VS Code. So what you'll need to do, you'll need to either log off Vulcan, or in my case, I'm just going to open another window here. So you can't be on Vulcan to use the copy. You'll need to just have another terminal window or shell open. The first thing, what we'll do first is we will copy from our laptop to Vulcan. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to navigate to the folder where my file is stored. I think, do I have something here? I've got a lot of stuff here. I'm going to see if I can find maybe in test. I think I got a little folder in test here. So I'm going to navigate to this folder test. Since I'm on Windows, I've got to use the Windows commands. Okay, that's good. Let me just look at Vulcan here and see what I've got. Just make sure I don't copy the same thing over again. Okay, I've got a to-copy.txt here. So what I will do is I will copy this file to copy.to.txt from my laptop to Vulcan. And I'm going to do that using this command secure copy, where the shortcut is SCP. And it's just like using copy or move. You're going to say from and then to. In this case, my from is going to just be the file name that I want to copy, because I'm already in this folder, so I don't need to specify the path. So I'm going to say to copy to.txt. And then the to location, I need to give it the whole path. So I need to give it my Blazor ID at mote.sys.uab.edu, and then a colon, and then the tilde/, and that basically says, hey, I'd like to put this in my home folder. After that, I can put other path if I want. If I have a subfolder I want to put it in, I could, put that here and keep doing forward slashes and folders until I get to the place where I want to put it. But in this case, I just want to put it in my home folder, and then you can give it a file name if you want it to be a different file name, or if you just leave it like this, it'll just use the same file name. And in this case, I just want to use the same file name. So this basically says, please do a secure copy this file to copy2 text from my hard drive to Vulcan, right? My account on Vulcan, and specifically my home folder. Hit enter, and it should ask for our password. And if this works, we should get a one-line indication that 100% of the file was copied. So we'll just wait for a second here and see if we get that. And we do. Okay, and so we could see 100% of our file was copied, and it'll also give us the time, but since this file was so small, it didn't take long at all. Okay, so now if we go to Vulcan, we should see that file here in our home folder, and we do. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so now what I want to do is, actually, I'm going to, on Vulcan, I'm just going to rename to copy.text to copy3.text, just so we can keep track of what we're doing here. Okay, so now I've got a to copy3 file, and I want to copy that file from Vulcan and to my hard drive. So again, I need to go to a window that's not on Vulcan. So I'm going to go to this same window that I had before here. And it's going to be the same command, scp for secure copy, and to and from, right? But in this case, the to is going to be Vulcan. So I'm going to give it my Blazor ID at mote.sys.uab.edu :/ which means the home folder. And then again, I could give it any path that I need, but in this case, my file is in the home folder. So I just say the name of the file, to copy3.txt. Okay. Oops, and that was from, I wrote that wrong. Okay, so that is copying from Vulcan from my home folder, and copy this to copy3.text, and I want to put it on my hard drive. If I say dot, then it will put it in the current folder. In this case, I am in this test folder, so that's where it's going to put it. I could also give it a path, but I like to go ahead and navigate to the folder that I want to put it in and just use this dot. I find that this works best, and it should ask for our password again. And again, if this is successful, it should give us a one line, that the file copied 100%. We'll just give that a second to copy. Okay, and it said that it copied to copy3, and I'll just look here, and yes, I see to copy3 is on my hard drive. So hopefully that's helpful. Now you know how to use VSCode to access Vulcan. You know some new commands you can use in the terminal window. You already know how to create folders and files and how to download those from Vulcan using VSCode. And now you have a way you could do a secure copy from the terminal window as well. Practice a little bit with those. Feel free to log on to Vulcan and practice with those. If you're on Windows, highly recommend you to activate your Windows subsystem for Linux, and maybe Ubuntu as the Linux version, which is very user-friendly, and play around with those as well. If you need anything, of course, Ian or Dylan and I can help you out. Just please shoot us an email or stop by office hours. Thanks.